For his party, they got a DJ. For mine, it was my dad's old boombox with a couple of mixed CDs. We went through the whole party, and I figured my parents might have just been waiting to spring a surprise gift on me. But that didn't happen. I asked them as things were wrapping up why there was no car when my brother got one, and they said they felt like he'd worked harder for it. I asked what he did that I didn't do because I did all of that and more. My grandma was nearby and heard everything. She then asked them why as well. She ended up lecturing my parents, saying she was extremely disappointed in them for showing favoritism. Then she proceeded to announce to everyone still there that my parents thought it was fine to get their firstborn son a car and a DJ, but not their second. She even pointed out how much harder my parents tried for my brother's 18th birthday than they had for mine. My uncle was the first to stand up and say something, followed by everyone else who hadn't left yet. I ended up just walking away and going to my room to sit and think. I got a few apology calls from relatives, and my grandparents convinced me to go out with them for the evening. But when I got back, my parents were pissed and told me I had shamed them in front of the whole family. I just walked past them because I didn't want to fight. The next few weeks went by with a silent treatment between us. Then, a few days ago, my parents suddenly surprised me with a white '98 Subaru Legacy that runs great. They practically threw the keys and the title in an envelope at me and said to have fun. I got the car, and they're paying for insurance for the next 6 months like they did for my brother. I know a car isn't really a right, but a privilege, so I feel like I've essentially blackmailed my parents into getting me one. Update 5 months later. I've not logged onto this account in roughly 5 months, so now I can tell you all the rest of what happened before college starts. But before that, there are some things I want to address from previous commenters. I literally needed a car because there was no way for me to get a job without one. I had no personal transportation and live over 10 miles from the nearest bus stop. So for those who kept telling me to give the car back because they think I was either too spoiled and should accept that life is unfair, or that I shouldn't take handouts, or that I shouldn't accept gifts from crappy parents, please just stop. My inbox was so crammed full when I logged back on that it took some time to go through it all. It doesn't really matter anyway though. I did get a part-time job that later went full-time for the summer after I graduated. But 3 weeks into working part-time, the Subaru blew the head gasket while on the highway at about 45 miles an hour. The temperature gauge redlined, and I had to pull over and call for help. My grandparents took a look at the car and found that someone had run a lot of gasket sealer in it, and it was still in the coolant. The car was basically band-aided back together before my parents bought it and was then barely hanging on by a thread. It drove great, and I was never pushing the car hard as I'm kind of a slow driver. My parents claimed no prior knowledge of the problem, but their only real reaction was to shrug and say it was karma for making them get me the car in the first place. That was a mistake because my grandparents were right there to witness it, and they tore into my parents like none other. My grandma told me to go wait in my room and let them sort it out. It was 2 hours before I was called back into the living room. My parents were on the couch and looked like they'd been metaphorically hit by a truck. My uncle and 2 other relatives were there now too. My grandparents had gotten it out of them that when they bought the car, they just looked for the cheapest thing they could find close to the area that still ran and bought it, no questions asked. They didn't even bother to inspect the car, let alone properly read the ad for it. My uncle, who knows a thing or two about cars, told me that the engine would basically need to be rebuilt because the head gasket warped the block, and it would cost more than the car is worth to fix it. I had to call into work and tell them I was unable to make it in because my car was fried. They understood and basically put me on a sort of unpaid leave for the moment. Now, I want to point out that I had no involvement in what happened next. My grandparents just told me to chill for a while and let them and my parents take care of this, and they did. A few days later, they came back with a 1999 Honda Civic hatchback with 180,000 miles on it. It was white like my Subaru and drives great. It's not all-wheel drive like the Subaru, but it's great on the road and gets better gas mileage. There was also a list of all recent repairs done to the car, including things like a new radiator. My uncle also went over the car before giving it the okay, and I thanked everyone profusely.